I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're sitting down with Claudia Braymer, Executive Director of Protect the Adirondacks, to talk about the state administration of life inside upstate New York's Blue Line and consider possible changes to the oversight of the region. So Protect the Adirondacks is in the midst of a multi-year review of the Adirondack Park Agency Act, which serves as, I guess, the underlying foundation for more than 5 decades of the agency that has oversight of the Adirondacks. What do you think of, I guess, the implementation of that law 5+ decades later? I mean, is there a case to be made that the world in 2026 requires some updates to the law?
Definitely. That's what we think. It was adopted first in 1972, and it hasn't been substantively updated since then. So we definitely think that there are some modern challenges, some new things facing the Adirondack Park Agency Act and the Adirondack Park in general that require the act to be modernized and updated and give the park agency some more jurisdiction over certain issues and clarity about what they should be doing when private land projects are coming before the agency for review.
Well, what are some of the practical challenges that arise where you feel like the law is just not up for the questions of modern day?
Well, one thing that's pretty glaring for the Adirondack Park, because it's such a big threat to the overall culture and environment of the park, is climate change. Mm-hmm. Obviously, climate change is not mentioned anywhere in the Act. We have the climate law, the CLCPA, that does require the agency to do some climate analysis, but we think that the Act itself could be a lot clearer about climate change considerations that the agency needs to undertake and review when they're looking at certain private land projects. Another thing that is mentioned in the Act, but it's not really utilized very much, is affordable housing. There's some talk about community housing in the Act, but we think that this is a really serious concern for communities in the park because people are having a hard time finding places to live, to continue being residents in the park. So some more language about what the affordable housing requirements would be for new subdivision projects, larger subdivision projects or other residential development projects like, apartment buildings or that sort of thing.
And you make a point about this applying to private land. Is that an important distinction when we think about the Adirondacks?
Right, because the Adirondack Park, as most people know, it's 6 million acres up there in the northern part of the state. Only half of the park is owned by the public as part of the Forest Preserve. And that is all governed by the State Land Master Plan, which is a different part of the agency's overall responsibility. But really, the state land is managed by the Department of Environmental Conservation. So what falls into the Adirondack Park Agency's jurisdiction are just the private lands, the other roughly 3 million acres that are owned by private landowners in the park.
And what about the composition of the Adirondack Park Agency itself? Is that something that you're looking to change, either who serves on it, the makeup of it? Is that part of this conversation?
Yeah, right now there are 12 members of the Adirondack Park Agency board, and then they're supported by an entire staff. There's an executive director, there's agency counsel, there's regulatory programs and natural resources staff. So all of that is in place. And of course, we still think that they could have more staff people there to be doing better, more robust natural resources analysis and that sort of thing. But as far as the Adirondack Park Agency board, there's a person who sits with the board during the meetings, but they don't have a vote. It's the local government representative.
Okay.
So we think that that person should be given a vote on the Adirondack Park Agency board, and also to add some more qualifications for the board members that they need to be part of environmental, civic, or other community organizations related to the park, so that these people have a deeper understanding of the Adirondack Park the park itself and the communities there. So that's something that we would like to change the composition of the board members. Yeah.
Well, what other parts of the law do you think are ripe for an update?
Well, one of the big sections that the Adirondack Park Agency has to take into consideration when reviewing private land projects is the development considerations. It's a big part of the act that talks about what needs to be considered as far as air impacts, water and wetlands impacts, soils impacts, that sort of thing. And there are a lot of changes that could be made to clarify what the agency needs to look at throughout that section. It's a little bit nebulous right now, so we'd like to make it clearer, more refined what exactly they need to look at and what are the adverse impacts that should be taken into consideration when the agency is reviewing projects.
What has that ambiguity meant for the actual implementation of the law as it is now.
Yeah, it's not exactly clear what the threshold would be for when there's an undue adverse impact. For instance, if there are wetlands impacts, how far is a project allowed to impact a wetland before the agency staff would say this is too much of an impact and we need to stop?
And what else? Anything from the administrative side of things, for example?
Yeah, right now the Act says that the statute of limitations for suing is very short. It's 60 days, and we think it should be the regular 4 months, same as other agency administrative decisions that people can challenge through an Article 78 petition.
Why that extra period of time? I mean, we've just had this whole experience in the budget where we're trying to curb lawsuits to some degree. So why do we want to open the door to make it even easier to bring suits?
The agency permits are very complicated. The process is complicated, and 60 days is a very short amount of time for someone or for an organization to pull together a meaningful lawsuit to challenge these kinds of decisions.
Anything else that you're looking to touch if they do decide to open this up?
Well, there's another problem in that right now, in order to deny a project, the agency has to first hold a public hearing, an adjudicatory hearing. It's a very long, complicated process. And in DEC's process, you can deny the permit and then the applicant has an opportunity to request a hearing. So we think it should be the same way as DEC and flip-flop those two things. The agency should be allowed to deny a project and then give the applicant the right to request a hearing afterwards, not the other way around.
Well, I mentioned at the top that you're doing a multi-year review and you've been soliciting feedback from all sorts of stakeholders. And I think one thing that is fair to say about any time there's a question in the Adirondacks is that you're going to get a variety of responses. Has that been the case with this as well? Or are there issues where you feel like a clear consensus has emerged?
That's a very good point. There's always a lot of push and pull in the Adirondacks. And one thing I want to say is that any changes to the Act are going to need to be balanced. The Adirondack Park itself is really the primary goal of it is for the protection, preservation of the unique natural resources in the park. But there's also a clear recognition that people live in the park and they have to be able to make a living. They have land use development rights depending on the different land classifications in the park. So lots of stakeholders have different opinions about how the park agency is working, but not a lot of people have an in-depth understanding of the Act itself. It's very complicated. And one of the things that there is consensus about is that the jurisdictional provisions in the Act are very confusing. And something that could help people understand when they need an APA Act permit is to clarify and clean up the jurisdictional provisions in the Act. But that's a very big lift. It is a hinge or a hook for the agency to have jurisdiction over certain projects. So that, while everyone agrees that it probably should be clearer, there's no clear consensus about how we do that and what certain things could be changed or tweaked in the Act to make that better.
Well, to that end then, is there some merit to the idea of better the devil you know than the devil you don't? Because once you open up a law and begin tinkering with it, it could come out of your hands, to protect the Adirondacks might not be the one writing the new statutory language. So is that something that you're concerned about?
Those words have been spoken directly like that. We know what this is. We know it's confusing, but we'd rather have this than something that we...
confusing law.
Yes. Yeah, so we definitely understand that. And to your point, we're not writing the bill. This is the legislature and the governor are going to need to be involved and be willing to take on the undertaking of amending the APA Act. And maybe it won't be one giant, effort all at once. Mm-hmm. That's how it came into existence. It was just one enormous bill, and it was very long and complicated at the time. We could try to make changes like that, or we could try to do piecemeal changes over time to certain provisions of the Act. Now, what makes it difficult is a lot of the provisions, the sections in the Act, interact with one another.
Yeah,
so
all
if you
tied together. Yeah.
if you try to change one, you're going to have to look at changing the others.
Well, we've been speaking with Claudia Braymer. She's the Executive Director of Protect the Adirondacks. Claudia, thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.